can't explain. Sometimes mainly we have some other issues that we say are really evil. But we don't tend to use the word demonic, I don't think. Maybe we have a tendency to write this story off as something that has no impact on us. It's tempting to do that. One of the stories in the midst of things we don't understand that I love to tell comes from my growing up. And an elderly neighbor who was very gregarious. He got many stories. But one of the stories I remember, him growing up and on the prairies in the darkness of night before electricity and all the yard lights and doing chores, how he remembered that eerie call of coyotes, you see, on the prairie. And no, it's not quite a wolf. The wolf has its own unique sound. But a pack of wolves, when they start singing back and forth, it's really scary, especially a young kid. He remembers doing the chores, and yes, he could see a light from the house, you see, but he had to go to the barn with the corrals, he had to feed the stock. And then to make it back from there to the house. His one thing was to look at the light of the house and hoping it didn't go off, because then he was really lost. The old candle in the middle of the lantern. But then also the song that he had learned as a very young boy, Jesus loves me, this I know. And for him to be deemed as a man, you see, and do the chores, but also be ready to cry, you see. But to be able to sing, Jesus loves me, carrying his chop nails, this I know. Jesus loves me, this I know. It's a wonderful image of those things that when we are confronted with issues, and perhaps as health, or transitions, or all of the other places of fear that do come to us in our lives, that old hymn, Jesus loves me, this I know, I believe is still amazing. What's further amazing is that we've had a series now in this Lucan text. And so since Easter, we're following Luke, and Luke has had a whole series of really dramatic healings. But the last two, we've also used John as well, tucked into with the raising of Lazarus, John 11. And then last week, we looked at the widow at Nain. There's really 3 deaths. So Jesus is really confronted, coming down the road, with this 3 deaths. It's the widow who has lost her son. So then we know that there's been a death of the father, there's a death of the son, but essentially the widow it's her death as well. There's no hope. There's nothing to live for. At that point, Jesus stops the briar and center of the funeral procession, and he commands this unnamed person, rise up. Same declaration, same purpose for Lazarus. Come on out! Walk out. And so we've just had this miracle of a resurrection. And you'd think that if you were an author, you'd kind of save that one to the end. You know, people who have got darkness or despair, Jesus can heal, whether it's the lepers or blind or lame, all of these issues. Jesus got power here over physical manifestations of pain, and then even in terms of the fear of death. But Luke has this right here in the middle, the resurrection. And then he goes on to say, and if that was something, look at this, the power that folk really experienced, this pain of this bewilderment, this terrorism really, of a demonic possessed person in your community, and the fear that it might be spreading, who knows. Jesus has all authority over this as well. Resurrection was one thing, but here there's even more power. And I think most authors would not have done that at the sequence, and even Jesus, it seems to be, and the commentaries tend to very much agree, that Jesus' ministry was on the way, extemporaneous, if you will, on the way. The parable of the lost children, the lost son, the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus on the way, Zacchaeus is on the way. That account of the tax collector to come down and have tea with you out of the sycamore tree. Those are all led with the phrase, on the way. So on the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was met with a woman that needed hope because her son had died. So it seems to be that sequentially where the author isn't trying to juggle this, you and I might do, to make the story even more dramatic. But he's not afraid to put in the resurrection. Here it is, it happened. And then following that comes this rather, well, exousia is the word that's used. It's like dynamite. It has full power, all authority. And Jesus uses the same word with baptism. The commission that we have, all authority is given to me under heaven and earth, to go therefore teach and baptize. That same word in Luke 4, right after he's baptized, Jesus is given all authority and he heals many demons. In fact, it's underlined in the text that Jesus heals all the demons that are brought to him. They recognize him, and Jesus says, don't be talking like that because there's so much work to be done. You'll make a ruckus of this. So Jesus silences the demons, but he heals all that he lays his hands on. A witness to the powerful presence of Jesus. And what I suggest for us, we may not see, as in the ancient cultures, the ease of using demonic language. But then again, we could. And whether we use demonic metaphorically for the evils, and you pick your evils, whether it's greed or workaholic or alcoholic, whatever the issues, or other drugs, all those things that really work as demons to suppress. Because one of the definitions of demons becomes, it moves you out of health. And if you use that issue, that which is intolerable, you see, is demonic. And we don't have to be seeing some demon under the rock to know that. We know the power of separation, the brokenness of religion. Demon possessions was very real in the ancient world. And we may not use that word, we may not put chains on people. But how often we put chains on ourselves? The chains of overwork, the chains of, choose what it might be in your community, or in your world, or perhaps in your life. The chain of fear, the chain of loss, the chain of chemical dependency. Our author from our toolkit today speaks of her growing up with a beautiful mother. She was the oldest of 3 sisters. 5 years older than the next sister, and the next sister was 3 years. And she talked about having such a glorious mother who was a great host and had such liveliness. But as this young woman grew up, a young girl grew up, she realized that her mother had this brown paper bag, you see, and she continually poured from this brown paper bag. And as the years unfolded, the mother's life grew more and more out of control. The young girl would take the paper bag in that bottle, thinking that's what was the problem, not realizing that her mother was an alcoholic and had other issues. And this woman went on to become, the young daughter went on to become a pastor, trying to deal specifically with the demon of alcoholism. With that wonderful story, in terms of Russia, we may know that Putin has really tried on his first term to limit the intake of vodka within Russian workers. Because at one point, 50% of people missing work were alcoholic. He's also got a new reform, if you're on CBC, where the number of lung cancers in Russia has superseded any place else in the world, even more than China. Because the number of workers that are smoking heavily. So Putin has a really aggressive approach in terms of the addiction to caffeine. And I don't know if you'll have any luck in that as well. But the author today talks about, well, she was working with a co-center, adult children of alcoholics, in Minneapolis, and was asked to come and do a presentation in Russia with the 12 steps. And the first step, and whether it's alcoholism or whatever issue, in terms of workaholic, all the other issues that we have that would suppress us and not allow us to be healthy. The first is that we admit we are powerless to any addiction and that our lives have become unmanageable. It's a marvelous first step. Admit we're powerless. The second one is we come to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore our sanity. Now, the original language of 12 steps was to use the word God. And then it was changed to God as we know it. It was actually a Lutheran consortium that put together much of the 12 steps. And now it's a higher power. But the Russian embassy decided that these inferences, that you declare yourself subject to another power, would not work. And so they tried to eliminate the first 2 steps. It didn't go. Going through recovery means we need to admit we are powerless to addiction. And we also, if there's no power greater than us, if our health is dependent on our wills, our strength, our motivation, you see, then we are sunk without hope. We need help, and that would be a fundamental message in this lesson. And maybe we're not wandering in some graveyard, but the privilege to know that we need help, and the greater privilege